Welcome back, everyone. It's hard to believe it's been a full year already
I know.
since the murder of Rachel Morin, a case that really gripped the nation.
Hmm.
A young mom
Right.
out for a run on a popular trail, the Monpall Trail in Harford County, Maryland,
Hmm.
vanishes. And of course, the community is in shock.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a trail that people know. They feel safe there. Families go there.
Right. It's not some, backwoods,
Exactly.
desolate place.
Yeah. And it was really a stark reminder, I think, for a lot of people that these kinds of tragedies can happen anywhere.
Yeah.
And that, even in places that we consider safe, there's still risks.
So let's go back to the beginning. Remind everyone what happened. So Rachel Morin, 37-year-old mother of five, goes out for a run.
That's right. August 5th, 2023.
August 5th.
In the evening, she heads out for a run on the Monpaw Trail, and she's never seen alive again.
And when was her body found?
Her body was discovered the next day,
Okay.
just off the trail.
So, obviously, huge investigation.
Oh, absolutely.
Harford County Sheriff's Office.
Hundreds of tips coming in. They're analyzing DNA, conducting searches nationwide. It's a massive effort to try to find out who's responsible for this.
And at some point, they released a video.
Yes.
The suspect, right?
That's right. They released a video, and they also released a sketch of the suspect.
And that video, if I remember correctly, was tied to a completely different crime.
You're exactly right. So it was a home invasion and an assault.
It's in Los Angeles.
In Los Angeles, yeah.
Yeah.
On a young girl and her mother.
So they had that DNA evidence and were able to tie it back to this.
Right. It was a national database.
Wow.
They ran the DNA through, and boom, there's a match.
So that was kind of a big break.
Huge break in the case, absolutely. Because, I mean, for months, they were hitting dead ends, and this suddenly gave them a real lead to follow.
Yeah, but then it still took a while to track him down, right?
It did. It took 10 months.
10 months.
And it led them to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
That's where they finally apprehend Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez.
And this is where, the case is already tragic and mysterious, but this is where it gets really complicated.
Yes.
Because we find out about his past.
Yes. And it's troubling, to say the least. I mean, we're talking about a prior arrest warrant for murder in El Salvador.
Wow.
Connected to that assault in L.A., and on top of all of that, multiple apprehensions by Border Patrol.
So red flags all over the place.
It's absolutely. It really raises questions about how someone like this could slip through the cracks despite all these encounters with law enforcement.
So let's unpack that. You mentioned the Border Patrol encounters. Let's start there. When did he first, encounter Border Patrol?
So he crosses the border in February 2023.
Okay.
And just a month before that, an arrest warrant had been issued for murder in El Salvador.
So he's fleeing, a potential murder charge.
Right.
And he's caught, but he's not
Right.
detained.
He was apprehended 3 times by Border Patrol that year.
Okay.
But each time, he was expelled under what was called Title 42.
And Title 42, just for people who don't remember, this was during COVID.
Right.
And it was a way to basically kind of bypass.
Exactly. It was a public health order, basically allowed for these expedited removals.
Because of COVID.
They were worried about spread of the virus and...
So he gets expelled. But it's not like he's...
Not a thorough vetting process.
No. So this is part of the issue that people, had.
Exactly.
Because he's able to then go on and allegedly commit these other crimes.
Right. And it brings up, the effectiveness of border security measures.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about people with a history of violence.
Right.
Title 42, it was a blunt instrument in a way.
Yeah. It was well-intentioned, I think, but...
Yeah. To deal with a specific problem.
Public health crisis.
But, as this case tragically shows, there can be unintended consequences.
Right. You try to solve one problem,
Exactly.
and you might inadvertently create another.
Yeah. It's a tough balance.
So, obviously, this becomes a huge story nationwide. It gets tied up in the presidential race. I think Rachel Morin's brother even spoke at the Republican National Convention.
He did.
And kind of placed the blame at the feet of the president's immigration policies?
Yes. It became very politicized.
Yeah. Was it a deciding factor, do you think, in the election?
That's...
or was it more a symptom of just the divisions that...
I think it's hard to say definitively how much it swayed voters, but it definitely played into those existing anxieties about immigration, about border security, about what some people see as, lax enforcement.
Right.
So I think for some voters, it probably did solidify their decision, who to vote for.
So, obviously just a really sad story. This family is looking for justice, though, right?
Absolutely. And that's what's important to remember amidst all the political back and forth. At the heart of this is a family that lost a daughter, a sister, a mother.
And Martinez Hernandez has been indicted. That's right.
And I think the prosecutors are seeking the maximum sentence.
They are. Life without parole, which is the most you can get in Maryland.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Long road ahead for this family.
Yeah.
As they navigate the legal system.
But hopefully they get some semblance of justice.
Yeah, that's what they're hoping for.
So we'll continue to follow the story and see how it all plays out.
It's one that I think will resonate for a long time.
It has resonated, and it will continue to.
Absolutely.
And we'll talk more about this case in our next part.
Yeah. There's a lot more to uncover.
There's a lot more to talk about. So we'll see you then.
See you then. It really is. They've been through so much.
It's amazing how they've been able to, I guess, channel that grief and that pain into something positive.
Yeah. And one of the things they've really pushed for is improving safety measures on the trail, right? I mean, you mentioned those 100 AI-powered cameras that were installed.
Right. As a direct result of Rachel's murder, which is, that's pretty significant. That's the most advanced security system of its kind in the entire state.
Yeah, it sounds pretty futuristic, facial recognition.
Right. It sounds like science fiction almost.
Yeah. So how does it work? I mean, what can these cameras actually do?
Well, they're not just recording, right? They can actually analyze what they're seeing. So we're talking facial recognition software, motion detection. They can even analyze behavior patterns. So let's say someone is loitering in an area where they shouldn't be or acting suspiciously. These cameras can flag that activity and send an alert to the authorities.
Wow. So real-time monitoring, basically.
Pretty much. It's a huge step forward in terms of deterring crime, enhancing security, and hopefully making people feel safer.
I mean, I get it, right? Like after something so horrible happens.
Of course.
Especially in a place where people thought they were safe.
Yeah.
You want to do everything you can to prevent it from happening again.
Right. And, people are understandably shaken. They want to feel that sense of security restored.
But then it makes you wonder, where do we draw the line?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Right. Between safety and privacy. I mean, like how much surveillance is too much?
It's a tough balancing act. And one that we're going to be grappling with more and more as technology keeps advancing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it could be misused.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the danger, right? In the wrong hands, this kind of technology could be used for all sorts of nefarious purposes. You could have discrimination. You could have oppression.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
It is. And that's why it's so important to have those legal and ethical frameworks in place to make sure this technology is being used responsibly.
So we need guidelines. We need oversight. We need to be very careful.
Absolutely. It's not just about the technology itself.
Yeah.
It's about how we use it and what safeguards are in place.
Switching gears a little bit, let's talk about the media.
Because obviously, this was a huge story.
Oh, yeah. It dominated the headlines for weeks.
And it got even more intense, I think, because of the whole immigration angle.
Absolutely. That added this a whole other layer of complexity to the coverage.
So do you think that helped or hurt the investigation, all that attention?
Well, it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, all that media pressure really put the heat on law enforcement to solve the case.
So it probably helped in some ways?
It might have. They probably had more resources, and just keeping the case in the public eye might have generated some valuable tips.
Right.
But on the other hand, when you have that much attention,
it can get out of control.
It becomes a frenzy.
Speculation runs wild.
Exactly. Facts get distorted, rumors spread like wildfire, and it becomes harder and harder to separate truth from fiction.
Yeah, and then you have the whole immigration element on top of that.
Right. I mean, that added fuel to the fire.
Yeah.
Made it even harder for the media to report on the case responsibly.
Because it became about so much more.
Exactly. It wasn't just a murder investigation anymore.
Right. It was this symbol of...
It became a lightning rod for all these anxieties about immigration, about border security, about the failures of the system.
Right. And everyone's got their own agenda?
Absolutely. And they're all using this case to push their narrative.
So it becomes almost impossible to have like a reasoned, balanced discussion about it.
It gets lost in all the noise, all the political rhetoric.
So let's talk about Victor Martinez Hernandez then.
Okay.
Because you mentioned that the prosecutors are seeking life without parole.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
So in Maryland, a life sentence without the possibility of parole means that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. No chance of getting out, even if he has good behavior.
So no matter what, he's never getting out.
It's the most severe punishment they have in Maryland.
And it's usually reserved for...
It's the worst of the worst.
So what happens next? I mean, he's been indicted. What's the next step in the process?
So now it enters the pretrial phase.
Okay.
You've got hearings, motions filed by both the defense and the prosecution, and then there's discovery, where both sides have to exchange evidence.
And just for people who, don't speak legalese,
Sure.
what does indicted mean?
So basically, a grand jury, which is a group of citizens, has looked at the evidence that the prosecution presented, and they've decided there's enough there to go to trial.
So it's kind of like a checkpoint.
Yeah, just to make sure the case is strong enough.
Before you go through this whole trial process.
Exactly. So then during the trial, both sides present their case, they call witnesses, they show evidence, and the jury decides guilty or not guilty.
And if the jury finds him guilty, then the judge decides on the sentence.
Right. Which could be life without parole in this case.
It's a long process.
It is.
But we have to remember, he is innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely. That's a cornerstone of our legal system. Everyone deserves a fair trial.
But even if he is found guilty,
yeah,
there are still so many unanswered questions, right? Like, we don't know how long he was in Maryland before.
Right. And what was his motive?
Yeah. Why Rachel? I mean,
those are questions that may never be answered.
And even if he's convicted, there's not going to be, complete closure.
Not really. I mean, how can there be after something like this?
It's a reminder that some things just don't make sense.
They don't. And that sometimes, even with an arrest and a conviction, the pain and the questions linger. It's
true. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, a year later, what do we know about how Rachel's family is doing?
They've shown incredible strength throughout this whole thing. They've been so vocal, fighting for justice for Rachel, keeping her memory alive.
Yeah.
And they've, turned their grief into action, pushing for better safety measures on the trail, raising awareness about immigration policy. I mean, it's really inspiring.
It's amazing the things that people can do when they're faced with these unimaginable tragedies.
It's true. Sometimes you see the worst of humanity.
Right.
And then other times you see this incredible resilience and strength.
It's true. So this case has resonated with people, I mean, obviously in Maryland, but across the country?
Oh, absolutely.
Why do you think that is? What is it about this story that's really captured people's attention?
I think it's a few things, right? I mean, first of all, it's just so random. This brutal crime.
In broad daylight.
On a trail where people should feel safe.
Yeah.
It could have been anyone.
Yeah.
It really shattered that sense of security that a lot of us have. And then you add in the suspect's background,
right,
the immigration angle. It tapped into those deep anxieties that a lot of people have about border security. Yeah. So it became this much bigger story about more than just this one tragic murder.
Yeah. And we've talked a lot about those political dimensions. But I think it's important to emphasize to our listeners that we're not here to
take sides. Yeah.
Or push a particular agenda. We're just trying to present all the facts.
Absolutely.
And all the different perspectives.
We want people to hear everything.
Right.
And then make up their own minds.
Exactly. So I think, we've talked about people using this case to argue for stricter immigration enforcement.
Right.
But there are also those who say, hey,
this is a humanitarian issue.
Right.
This guy was fleeing violence.
He was fleeing a murder charge.
Exactly. He was desperate. And maybe if our system was better at addressing those root causes, he wouldn't have ended up here.
It's complex. There's no easy answers.
Not at all. But it's something we need to talk about.
We do.
As a society.
Yeah. So as we wrap up our deep dive on the Rachel Morin case, I mean, it's clear that this tragedy has had a lasting impact.
It really has.
On the community, on the nation.
It's a story about loss, about justice,
yeah,
about those complex issues with immigration.
But it's also a story about resilience.
It is. About the human spirit's ability to find strength.
Yeah. Even in the face of unimaginable darkness.
Yeah. So we want to encourage our listeners,
Yeah.
think about the questions this case raises.
Mm-hmm.
How do we create a society that's truly safe?
Right.
How do we balance security with freedom?
How do we make our immigration system both effective and humane?
And most importantly, how do we honor Rachel Morin's memory?
And make sure something like this never happens again.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But they're important questions.
They are. And ones that I think we all need to grapple with.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
Into the Rachel Morin case. And we'll continue to follow this story as it develops.
We will.
So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.